we agreed upon making that the first single. We went from there, and literally weeks later, it was #1. I didn't even believe it. I was like, yeah, right.
Blu Cantrell's sudden breakdown wasn't just another celebrity story. Her dark secret went public against her intention.
Stop talking, because you really don't have anything to corroborate your story right now. You know what I'm saying? Stop talking and try to capitalize off of me. I'm a good person.
Behind her success, she struggled with severe health episodes that finally burst into public view. On September 3rd, 2014, at 2 a.m. in Santa Monica, she was found screaming, leading to a psychiatric evaluation. This video tells who she was, what happened that night, and why her career never recovered. To understand what happened to Blu Cantrell in 2014, we first need to rewind. Who was Blu Cantrell before the headlines of madness and paranoia? Born Tiffany Cobb on March 16, 1976, in Providence, Rhode Island, Blu was raised in a working-class family. Her entry into music came through performing in local clubs and eventually catching the attention of record producers in the late 90s. By 2001, her debut single, Hit 'em Up Style Oops, exploded onto the charts.
Give it up for Blu Cantrell.
The song reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming the highest charting debut for a female R&B artist that year. Blu's style was sharp, confident, and unapologetically female-driven, an anthem for women tired of betrayal in relationships. Her debut album, So Blue, went gold, solidifying her place as one of R&B's brightest new voices. In 2003, her second album, Bittersweet, gave her another smash, Breathe, featuring Sean Paul, which dominated the UK singles chart for 4 consecutive weeks. But just as quickly as she rose, Blu began to disappear. After 2003, the hits stopped coming. By 2008, her appearance on NBC's Celebrity Circus was the last major time audiences saw her in control of her career. Then came silence.
I think Cirque du Soleil was what I really wanted to join because it had the music and the singers, and I wanted to do the singing, and then it was like, everything was like a dream on stage.
Fans wondered, where did Blu go? Some whispered about label issues. Others said her personality clashed with executives. But in reality, the answer was far darker, and it surfaced years later on a Santa Monica street. On September 3, 2014, in Santa Monica, neighbors heard screams at 2 a.m. According to The Independent and BET, Blu Cantrell was spotted running through the streets, yelling that someone had poisoned her with gas. Eyewitnesses described her as frantic and disoriented. Some said she begged people for help, convinced her life was in immediate danger. Authorities arrived quickly. The Santa Monica police, unsure if Blu was under the influence of substances or in the middle of a psychological episode, detained her for her own safety. She was taken to a nearby hospital, where she underwent a psychiatric evaluation, commonly known as a 5150 hold, in California. The Independent reported that Blu was sectioned after refusing to calm down, her paranoia escalating even as officers tried to reassure her. TMZ and BET confirmed she repeatedly claimed invisible forces were out to get her. The incident lasted long enough that it made national headlines. For many who hadn't heard Blu's name in years, it was a shocking reintroduction. The once glamorous R&B star now reduced to tabloid coverage about a mental breakdown. This wasn't just a random night gone wrong. It was the public unveiling of something Blu had kept private for years: struggles with paranoia, possible addiction, and untreated mental health crises. BT described her as hospitalized for mental evaluation. The Independent used harsher language, hospitalized and sectioned. TMZ leaned toward spectacle, highlighting how she screamed about poison gas. Eyewitness accounts were consistent. Blu was out of control, convinced she was under attack. But the bigger story was how quickly the media turned her tragedy into entertainment. Headlines mocked her as a one-hit wonder gone crazy. What really happened to Blu Cantrell? This was the same industry and media ecosystem that once celebrated her chart-topping anthem, applauding her as the next star of R&B. But when stumbled, those cheers were replaced by cruel headlines and mocking commentary. Support was almost never mentioned. The idea of treatment or care barely registered in the coverage. For Blu herself, the damage was devastating. After years of silence and absence from the mainstream stage, her public image was already fragile. Now it was stamped permanently with stigma. In the eyes of the world, she was no longer the singer of one of the 2000's biggest anthems. She was a cautionary headline. So why did Blu Cantrell break down? To understand, we have to dig into the invisible weight she was carrying, pressures that built silently until they spilled into the open on that Santa Monica street in 2014. The first and most obvious factor was fame and its volatility. In 2001, Blu was celebrated as R&B's newest star. Her breakout single, Hit 'em Up style Oops, dominated the charts, and she was hailed as the voice of empowerment for women tired of betrayal. But fame in the music industry is rarely stable. Just as quickly as she rose, the spotlight shifted. Beyoncé was launching her solo career, reshaping pop and R&B. Alicia Keys arrived with a piano-driven sound that critics adored and Grammy voters embraced. Ashanti, Keisha Cole, and later Ciara all captured mainstream attention. Blu, once considered a frontrunner, suddenly found herself in the shadows. For any artist, this sudden dimming of the spotlight can fracture self-confidence. The second factor was mental health stigma, particularly in the early 2000s. Unlike today, when artists such as Kid Cudi or Summer Walker can openly discuss therapy or depression, the industry then demanded silence. Careers were built on image, not vulnerability. If Blu was struggling with anxiety, paranoia, or depression, admitting it publicly could have cost her everything. And so, like many artists of her time, she may have suffered in silence, carrying an invisible burden behind closed doors. A third dimension was gender dynamics in R&B. Women artists faced harsher scrutiny, constant comparisons, and an unforgiving industry that demanded both perfection and relatability. Men in the genre often had more freedom to reinvent themselves after a flop. Women, however, risked being permanently labeled as washed up. Blu's identity as a strong, outspoken female artist may have set her up for more pushback behind the scenes than the public ever saw. There was also the question of financial and label struggles. Artists signed in the early 2000s often faced unfavorable contracts, and royalty disputes were common. Blu's career slowdown after 2003 may not have been purely about talent or public demand. It could also have been shaped by label politics and financial constraints that drained her resources and options. Without a strong label push, even a talented artist can fade from the charts quickly. Finally, there were personal insecurities. Reports from her 2014 breakdown suggest Blu referred to herself as a one-hit wonder.
Regardless of whether I go number one or not, or if I make sales, I'm always going to make music because that's what my life is consumed in.
That statement revealed a wound she carried, the fear that her success had been fleeting, that her moment of glory had slipped away forever. For someone who had tasted global recognition, the fall into obscurity must have been devastating.
You know, some people say, if you're Grammy nominated and you're a singer, you don't need to take.
Put all of these together: the collapse of fame, the silence around mental health, the gendered pressures, the financial struggles, and the personal doubts. And you have the storm that culminated in 2014. Blu's breakdown wasn't sudden. It was the visible eruption of years of hidden battles. Unfortunately, the world didn't see those battles. All it saw was the meltdown. In the aftermath of her public breakdown, what followed was not a carefully crafted comeback or a heartfelt public statement. Instead, there was silence. Long, heavy silence. After September 2014, Blu Cantrell essentially disappeared from public life. No interviews, no clarifications, no social media outreach. Her official channels went dark, leaving fans to wonder where she had gone. In an age when celebrity crises often lead to public redemption arcs, rehab announcements, carefully managed press runs, or reality TV reintroductions, Blu chose the opposite. She stepped away completely. Some claim she'd performed small, private shows overseas, particularly in the UK and parts of Eastern Europe. Social media posts occasionally surfaced with people insisting they had seen her on stage in intimate venues, still capable of commanding a crowd with her voice. Yet none of these sightings were ever verified by Blu herself, and no official footage or announcements surfaced to confirm them. For the mainstream audience, it was as if she had vanished. The industry's silence was even louder. There were no statements of support from record labels, no public gestures from fellow R&B stars who had once shared charts with her. For someone who once collaborated with global acts like Sean Paul, the absence of solidarity was striking. The music world, which had celebrated her when she was profitable, now looked the other way. This silence gave rise to speculation. Did Blu walk away by choice, realizing that the price of fame was too steep? Or was she quietly pushed out, blacklisted after her public struggles made her a liability in the eyes of the industry? Both theories circulated among fans, but without confirmation, they remain only theories. The financial dimension also cannot be ignored. Artists of Blu's era often faced financial precarity, especially if their careers were cut short. Without consistent royalties or touring income, maintaining stability could be difficult. If Blu faced financial strain alongside her mental health struggles, the silence could have been partly survival, stepping back to protect what little peace she had left. For fans, the disappearance was bittersweet. On one hand, they longed for her voice, her style, her presence in R&B. On the other, there was an understanding that perhaps Blu was protecting herself from an industry that had shown little compassion. In her absence, her songs, particularly Hit 'Em Up Style and Breathe, took on an even greater weight, becoming the markers of her legacy rather than stepping stones to further success. In the end, the aftermath of Blu's breakdown was defined not by redemption, but by retreat. Unlike some artists who return with tell-all documentaries or confessional albums, Blu left questions unanswered. The silence itself became part of her story, a haunting reminder that not everyone survives the industry's pressures with their voice intact. Blu Cantrell's breakdown wasn't just an isolated incident. It was part of a larger, recurring pattern in the music industry, one where talented artists collapse under invisible pressures while the world watches. Look across R&B and pop in the late 90s and 2000s, and the examples are countless. Lauryn Hill walked away from the spotlight at the height of her fame, speaking later about the suffocating pressures and loss of personal freedom. Mariah Carey was hospitalized in 2001 after an emotional breakdown that tabloids sensationalized rather than contextualized. Amy Winehouse battled addiction publicly. Her pain turned into tabloid fodder until her death in 2011. And Whitney Houston, perhaps the most celebrated R&B voice of all, was hounded by an industry that profited from her while ignoring the battles that consumed her. Blu's collapse fits squarely within this pattern. Like the others, she was an artist adored by fans but discarded by the system when she struggled. When her breakdown became public, she wasn't offered empathy. She was turned into a headline. Research backs up this trend. Studies show that musicians are up to 3 times more likely to experience depression and anxiety compared to the general population. Long touring schedules, unstable income, and constant public scrutiny create conditions ripe for mental strain. Yet for years, the industry treated these struggles as personal weaknesses rather than occupational hazards. In the early 2000s, the conversation around mental health in music was almost non-existent. Therapy was stigmatized, and vulnerability was often mocked. Artists were expected to push forward, smile on stage, and maintain a marketable image no matter what they were battling privately. That silence created a cycle where breakdowns were inevitable and often catastrophic. Today, the culture has shifted somewhat. Artists like Summer Walker have openly discussed anxiety, even canceling tours for their own well-being. Kid Cudi has become a symbol of openness around depression in hip-hop. Demi Lovato has used her platform to speak candidly about addiction and mental illness. This shift suggests progress, but Blu's story remains a painful reminder of what happens when the industry fails to care. Her 2014 episode also highlights the role of media in shaping public perception. Instead of contextualizing her paranoia and breakdown as symptoms of illness, outlets mocked her claims of being poisoned with gas. The narrative was not about her need for care, but about her fall from grace. This media framing amplified the stigma and reinforced the idea that mental health struggles are entertainment, not emergencies. The bigger picture is clear. Blu Cantrell's story was not just hers. It reflected a systemic failure in R&B and beyond, a failure to recognize that artists are people first, not products. Until that changes, more stories like hers will emerge, and more voices will be lost to silence, retreat, or worse. Blu Cantrell's legacy is complicated. On one hand, she is remembered for Hit 'em Up style, an anthem that still echoes across radio throwback playlists and TikTok nostalgia clips. On the other, her name is tied to the haunting memory of her 2014 breakdown. Both truths coexist, shaping how history remembers her. Musically, her impact cannot be denied. Hit 'em Up style was more than a catchy R&B single. It was a cultural moment. It gave women a playful yet biting anthem about revenge and empowerment, and it stood out in an era dominated by love ballads. Her collaboration with Sean Paul on Breathe further proved her versatility, blending R&B with dancehall in a way that resonated internationally. These songs remain her enduring contribution to the genre.
More records and more music that people love and they can listen to years from now. Not just for the moment, but when they have kids, let their kids hear my music.
But beyond the hits, Blu's legacy lies in what her story reveals about the fragility of fame. Her rise and fall serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder that one hit can change your life, but it can also define you in ways you never intended. The same audiences that celebrated her success were quick to consume her downfall, proof of how unforgiving celebrity culture can be. Today, fans continue to celebrate her work online. YouTube comments under her music videos often read like digital memorials. This song will never get old. She deserved so much more recognition. I hope she's okay, wherever she is. These small acts of remembrance show that while the industry moved on, listeners never fully forgot. Her story has also taken on new meaning in the era of open conversations about mental health. In hindsight, fans and critics alike can see that Blu's breakdown was not simply a fall from grace, but a human being cracking under pressures that many others in her position have faced. In this way, her story has become part of a broader push to acknowledge that mental health and artistry are deeply intertwined. The duality of Blu's legacy, the triumph of her music, and the tragedy of her breakdown forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. It asks us whether we value artists for who they are, or only for what they give us. It asks whether we, as fans and media consumers, contribute to the cycle of exploitation when we mock vulnerability, instead of empathizing with it. Ultimately, Blu Cantrell's name may not headline award shows or dominate charts anymore, but her legacy endures in two ways: through the timelessness of her music and through the lesson of her silence. Her story warns us about what is lost when the world listens only to the songs and not to the pain behind them. More than a decade has passed since Blu Cantrell's breakdown, and still, no definitive comeback has emerged. Her silence has become part of her identity, but silence itself carries meaning. In an industry where comebacks are celebrated and every struggle is monetized through documentaries and memoirs, Blu's retreat is unusual. By not returning, she resists the narrative arc we expect: crisis, confession, redemption. Instead, she remains an open question. That silence teaches us something about agency. Perhaps Blu chose to step away, valuing her peace over applause. Perhaps her disappearance is its own form of healing, one that doesn't conform to public expectations. If so, then her story challenges the idea that every artist owes us a redemption arc. Her silence also speaks to the industry's failure, that no one, not a label, not fellow stars helped her rebuild, is a reminder that the music world can be deeply transactional. Once the hits stop, so does the support. Blu's absence is an indictment of an ecosystem that consumes talent but rarely nourishes it. For fans, Blu's silence has become a mirror. It forces us to reflect on our role as consumers of celebrity struggles. Do we cheer the hits but laugh at the breakdowns? Do we demand entertainment even when it comes at the expense of someone's mental well-being? In the broader conversation about mental health in music, Blu's name surfaces now as a cautionary tale. She joins the ranks of artists whose breakdowns were mishandled by both industry and media. Her story urges today's generation to do better to recognize that behind every song is a person, and that fame should never strip someone of humanity. In that way, Blu Cantrell's silence isn't just an absence, it's a statement, one that continues to echo even louder than if she had spoken.